Hi everybody, this is Rhys Barber from Audiology Associates. Thanks very much for watching that earwax removal video today. I've got a really interesting case for you today. This was a lovely young man that came through having some real issues with hearing, really struggling with his ears here. Now, there's a bit of a twist at the end, so make sure you do stay for the end of the video as well. But what you can see here is we've got this very dry, hardened up earwax. Now, a couple of people you're going to be asking, why does earwax do this? Why is some earwax soft? Why is some earwax is wet? Some earwax is dry? It's all down to your genetic makeup. So you will find that based on your genes will dictate what type of wax you produce. So in this case, this lovely young man had a really dry wax that had perfectly formed to the shape of the ear canal. Now don't forget, when we refer to earwax, we're actually talking about cerumen. Now cerumen is actually a mixture of oil, dirt and debris all mixed together into one lovely package, and it should expel itself from the ear. It follows the epithelial migration out, and then with jaw movement towards that cartilaginous portion, that outer portion of the ear canal. So we're talking about this portion here that's surrounded by cartilage. Well, your temporomandibular joint, which is this one here, is hinged just below that area. So when it moves, your ear canal does this and has this effect of pushing and encouraging the cerumen on its way out. So you can see it's very dry. We're having to use the Jobson horn here. That's that little scoop, a little sort of almost like open spoon. You can see that's called a Jobson horn. So we're using that just to push down into the wax and try and pull this through. Now, the patient has been using some oil as well, which you can see just pressing out as we push down on the wax. You can see it just kind of seeping out from around the edges, which has the effect of softening the outermost portion of the wax, that surface layer of wax and cerumen here. But what it hasn't done is penetrated in, and that happens quite regularly when that cerumen is very dry. Now, what can happen is patients can feel this in their ear canals, especially this very dry type of cerumen here, because that canal wall, as it flexes, as that cartilaginous portion of the ear canal starts to flex, it's actually pushing against that ball of cerumen as well. So the patient had noticed a sensation of fullness in their ear, as well as having these hearing issues as well. So you can just see breaking this down, switching tools quite a bit here between the standard size Zollner tube and the Jobson horn as well. So just really working these little pieces out, and that happens quite regularly with these dry. You can see the waxing is this very matte color to it, and that normally indicates it's quite dry. You'll see lots of little tiny lighter colored pieces. Now those are bits of shed epithelial skin. So basically these have started to harden. They've started to fill with keratin because they've died off. So you get these flakes of dry keratin, dead epithelial cells, which is what the wax is meant to pick up. We're just dropping over the top of that cerumen in there now, just pulling forwards. There we go. Now guys, I did say I'd keep throwing the medical terminology in here. You can see how tough that was. It actually flicked off the top there and almost hit the actual endoscope itself. If you're still happy for us to do that, we'll carry on doing it. You may hear me flick terms. So if, for instance, cerumen, earwax, they're both the same thing, but they're interchangeable terms in here. They both mean the same thing. Just bringing this forwards, very dry. There we go, out that's coming. You can start to see these bigger pieces of cerumen breaking away here, and you've got a little bit of movement to this plug. You can see it starting to twist and turn in the canal as we're putting a little bit of pressure on with the Jobson horn there, trying to get behind this plug and pull this one through. Make sure you stay tuned for the second ear canal. It's quite an interesting case, the second ear canal. You have to stick with it. It's a long one, this one. But look at the size of that plug. We do show you everything on the ruler at the end, guys, so you can have a good look at it. Still more cerumen in here. Out, this is coming. I think we're coming towards the end of it now. I just got a sneaky peek at the tympanic membrane beyond there. Look at the color differences. You can see, with that epithelial layer, that dead epithelial layer is coming away there. You can see attached to the back end of that plug. You'll get a better look now as we go in. There you go. You can see how that has come away with that cerumen almost wrapped around that plug. That's what was holding everything in place. Now, if you imagine you've got that hard layer and you've got that dead epithelial layer around the outside edge, that's what's going to hold everything and anchor it in. But there we go, you can see the eardrum there, that pars flaccida region, the region just at the top right hand side of the screen there, just above the lateral process, the malleus there, the very tip of the hammer bone. You can see a little bit retracted in there, but otherwise not looking too bad. Now, this ear canal was a very, very different story. Now, you are going to see a polyp in this ear canal beyond this wax. It takes a while to get to it because this wax, although you can see it looks quite mobile at the moment, this wax was actually perfectly formed to the shape of the ear canal, so really causing quite a few hearing issues for this patient. And it is wedged in there. It really is a difficult one to get out because it is rock solid. So imagine if we start filling, if we've got cerumen then that has a higher concentration of keratin in it, then some of this dead epithelial skin cells that are filled with keratin, it's going to make this cerumen much harder, much tougher, and that's what's happened here. So don't forget, we talk about this thing called epithelial migration. So inside the ear canal, if you put a dot in the center of your eardrum, that's where the newest formed epithelial cells find. And every epithelial cell that's formed pushes its neighbor to the side. So what you do is, if you imagine that epithelial layer, those skin cells are migrating out to the outermost part of the eardrum to where you find the annulus, which is that ring of fibrous tissue on the outside of the tympanoid of the eardrum there. And then that then forms the ear canal wall skin. So it migrates out, so like a conveyor belt. And that's what we mean by epithelial migration. Now, as the skin travels to that outermost part, from that osseous portion, the part of the ear canal that's surrounded by the skull, os means bone, so that osseous portion of the ear canal, to the cartilaginous portion we were talking about earlier, this outermost portion, that skin's going to die off. And it's as those cells die off, they start to fill with keratin. Now that starts to flake away and gets mingled in and mixed in with the cerumen, and that's what one of the cerumen's constituent parts are. Now, if you've got a higher concentration of that inside this, it's going to make it much harder, tougher, because keratin is what your hair and nails are made out of. So imagine that, flakes of that inside, it's going to make the whole thing a lot tougher. So we're starting to break this down. You can see it is a little bit more mobile. It's moving in the canal as we're moving this around. We've got the St. Bart's hook in here just because I want to try and hook over the top of the wax and bring it to the outer portion of the ear canal, but I'm struggling to get the hook into the wax. I'm trying to use the microsuction to bring this forwards, but because it is such a hard surface on it, it's not quite gripping it. So we're using various other tools to try and bring it forwards. Normally, we'd use the St. Bart's hook to go beyond the wax. We'd twist it so that 90-degree bend you can see on the end would drop behind and we'd pull it forwards. But in this case, we can't get over the top. And that's the same here, you'll notice, with the Jobson horn as well. If you try and get around it, we're just pushing this plug back into place. So I think what we're going to have to do here is try and draw this forwards by using some suction and then wedge it almost in the outer portion of the ear canal to try and drop behind it. But make sure you stay tuned to the end because it's quite an interesting case with the polyp inside the ear canal as well. So we've got another tool, different one this time. This is the Rosen inserter. So I'm going to see if we can get beyond it. We can it's great for getting into smaller gaps, but because that hook is much thinner on the end, it tends to bring it straight through the wax there. It doesn't tend to sort of hold on to the back end of it. There we are, dropping over the top again. I'm just trying to reposition this. You can see it's broken a lot of the surface of the cerumen down now. So we're going to go back in now with some microsuction just to tidy this up. But there we go, you can really see how that whole plug is spinning there. We've got that little gap at the top. I'm just seeing if we can spin a little bit more to create a much bigger gap. There we go, lifting from the bottom. So we're almost trying to drop it at that back section further down. There we go, you can see I've twisted and turned the wax now. So this is the side that was actually sitting against the ear canal wall there. So we've got the St. Bart's hook. Can we get it? But you can see as soon as you try and get a grip, it just changes position again. Now, if I give you some information about polyps before we start seeing the polyp at the end. So a polyp is basically, there are two different types of polyp. The most common type is where you get, basically, if you imagine in the mid-ear space, we talk about the eardrum having 3 layers. Well, the backmost layer of the eardrum, that layer there is a mucosal layer. So what we get with the majority of polyps is you get edematous mucosal tissue, basically. So if you imagine the lining of the middle ear space, edema just means swelling. So if we talk about edematous tissue, it means swollen tissue. So we talk about edematous mucosal tissue. So that mucosal layer that's behind the eardrum there, that mucosal tissue, becomes swollen. And if you've got a perforation, you can push through the perforation. So what you get then is a very red, angry looking lump, if you like, in the ear canal, which has a very good blood supply. It'll bleed if you touch it. Usually it's accompanied by something called purulent otorrhea. So purulent just means discharge, otorrhea is discharge from the ear. So basically ear discharge. So that's one type. Now the other type you can get, it usually follows infection as well. That's the most common type of problem. That's what most common type of cause of these kind of polyps. But the other type you can get is formed by granulation tissue. Now that is usually formed by trauma to the ear canal. Now, when we talk about this particular plug, now this plug has been in here for a long time. You can see just how hard this is, so it's absolutely solid. Now, I think this is more likely the cause of where the polyp arose from. It's because it's irritating, aggravating, pressing against the canal wall. So I think that is a more likely cause for this particular polyp that you're going to see now. Now we're coming to the end of this, so we're just pulling this down. There you go. You can really see it starting to pull forward now. It's just breaking little bits off. So we're managing to just about get the Jobson horn over the top. It's almost pulling back in. Now the patient was really, really good. They were such a trooper through this. You know, we're constantly checking in with our patients, making sure that they're doing okay. You know, that they're coping well with the procedure. It's not uncomfortable. You know, anything out of the ordinary going on. Patient was really pleased. They were starting to hear so much better as we started to move this plug of cerumen out. But we can see it's not quite there yet. We've got to go a little bit further in. And then once we get this out, you'll be able to see that polyp. Now, it's a bit more of an unusual one. Now, I've never seen one that almost goes from the anterior portion of the ear canal, almost connects to the posterior canal wall as well. So you'll have a good look at it. It's quite a long, thin, basically fleshy mass, if you like, in here. Now we would have to refer this patient on to see the ear, nose and throat specialist, because when you come across polyps, you do want an ENT opinion. A lot of the time they will just remove it. They'll cauterize it and remove it. But it's always good to get an opinion, especially when you see a polyp like this one. Because the surface looks very different. So remember we saying that the surface of a polyp, it's normally like a fleshy red mass. There's a good blood supply, so it's very, very red, bright pink, will bleed really easily. Well, if it stays in the ear for a long time, what you tend to find, the surface then of that sort of epithelial surface of the polyp, it becomes a little bit more fibrous, but the surface then, you tend to find it becomes almost what they call metaplastic squamous epithelium. So it changes its appearance as well. So you get this much duller pink. It doesn't look this bright red, bright pink appearance to it. It gets a much duller appearance. Now there we go. Now you can see it to the left-hand side of the screen now. We will point out with some arrows in a second, but you'll be able to see that polyp there just to the left side. You can see that connecting there from that anterior to posterior portion of the ear canal. So we're just going to get rid of this little bit of, this is a little bit of skin. Now this patient doesn't report any discharge from the ear, which makes me think it's more of a granulation tissue polyp rather than that sort of edematous, I can put my teeth in, edematous mucosal polyp. So you can see here that layer there, that polyp layer, there we go. And what you'll find, see, it's not bright red, it's got that very dull pink appearance. That's what makes me think it's an older polyp. Now I think this has probably come from where that wax has been pressing, because that's been in there for years. Now if you look how much we took out between both ear canals, there's 7.5 centimeters, 3 inches, and they're not small pieces. So we will refer to ENT. ENT will assess that. They might well take a little biopsy of it, and then they'll probably remove it and cauterize it, just to remove that, guys. But we've asked the patient to come back and let us know how they got on. So if you stay tuned, I'm sure we'll get that video out for you soon. Well, guys, that was a long one to sit through. There was a lot of medical terminology in that one, so I hope I didn't baffle you too too much with science there. But as always, guys, if you do have any problems with your ears, you can book yourself an appointment, come and see myself or the lovely Mr. Taylor Green, who's not with me today. But if you book yourself an appointment by checking out the link tree in the description and the social media channels, that'll take you to our website and you can come along and see us. But as always, guys, take care of yourselves, take care of your ears, and take care of one another. Oh, and if you don't forget, can you hit the like and subscribe button for me? That would be absolutely fantastic. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye, everyone.